Hello, this is Ryan with Notes and Numbers, and today I'm going to try and do a little reaction video with a video I shot of myself using the Scale Skills series to warm up. I've been turning all of my students onto the various levels of that as is appropriate, and I'm trying to basically have something people can refer to as like, this is a way you can use this to warm up, this is a way to interact with these exercises, perhaps the level of care and attention to detail that you would want to exercise in the doing of it. And since I'll be kind of chatting through, I'm not really going to hold this up any longer, and we're going to go look at that video. Let's see here. So, let's see. We can kind of see, oh, this is actually important. Stretch. Like one of the first things you should do when you sit down is sort of do a little stretch, you know, kind of get your hands all feeling limber, maybe roll your shoulders, get that kind of thing going. And just generally make sure that you're not starting off with whatever physical stress has built up in the course of the day. Like, let that stuff out. Give yourself a little moment of just like touching base with your body. It'll be a lot easier if you do that. Just to clarify, if it's not super obvious, from the page in the upper left here, this is E minor, so it's a specific key. If that's meaningful to you, great. If not, you would probably be at a lesser level of it, but it mostly is a sense of kind of where does the tonal center live? How do things feel in general? And this would be from level 4. Anyway. Just a couple of things I noticed. You can kind of see like posture here is important. You want to make sure that you're not straining to sit up straight, but you do want to be kind of squarely on your sit bones. So what I just did right there, first off, notice how slow I'm going. I can play these scales just fine, but even so, when I'm warming up, I give it that extra time and attention. And here, I ran into a mistake on the way down. So rather than just start all the way at the beginning, work my way up and do it then again, I just make sure that I'm starting from the top. So you saw right there, same silly mistake. So I work the area around that mistake. That kind of keeps me a little more efficient. And if not 100% successful. This is an example, just those 2 notes. That's what I'm working on there. That's the thing that was getting in my way. I kept going to the wrong notes, so I broke it down to 2 notes, just to get used to that. So right there, maybe you heard that smudge, that carriage of the 2 notes there together. When we want the last to emerge from the first, yeah, more like that. And so again, I had a problem, so I broke it down to the smallest thing I could that included that problem. So having done that very slow, detail-oriented approach, you can hear I'm speeding it up now. And if in the course of like one day's practice, you don't get to the like double speed or getting it fast or whatever, if all you do is take it slow and focus on those little details, that's okay. That will get you to the point where you can actually just go faster. Things to point out here, notice where I'm sitting on the bench. Like I'm on that sort of forward third, and you can see perhaps that helps me feel really planted on my feet. So if and when I have to, I can kind of lean side to side. Right there again, had a problem. So cut it to just the area around that problem. suppose it's worth pointing out, we're not really going to talk about it here, but technically I'm playing the harmonic minor. For major scales, there's one structure. It's always the same. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. For minors, there are basically three species, and they mostly have to do with responding to context. So, among other things, the harmonic gives you a second to last note that really begs to converge to the last note. We call it a leading tone. But that's not in the default, like, natural minor. You can see right there, I slowed it back down because I ran into a mistake. So I kind of tried to speed it up until I started to hit rocky ground. Right underneath that, I'm now working it. Oh, my students will know this, but obviously there's a big focus in my studio on sort of motions and physicality and using that to sort of do the thing from your arm as often as you do it from your finger, if not much more often. So like that one felt weird. So I spend a moment here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I spend a moment here just getting comfortable setting that specific chord down. Depending on the key you're in, you might have to do that. You might need to give it that extra little bit of attention, and maybe my arms need to be further in, or maybe I need to change the sort of fingering that I'm using here, or you know, maybe I just need to get comfortable with it. Try it a few times so I don't have a panic moment, sneak in and tighten things up. Most of all, once I'm at the bottom of the keys, I should feel really relaxed. There shouldn't be like persistent strain. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to figure out if I were to try and do this in a legato way, if I had some structure in a piece of music that was like a rising chord figure, could I do it? If so, how would I have to change the fingering? So you can see, if you look down, there's no pedaling going on here. I'm just trying to figure out what can be held. It's not necessarily what the book is asking you to do, but if you can figure out a way to do it comfortably, that kind of challenge comes up in some more complicated polyphonic music, many voice music. Usually, rather than like full 3-note chords with this kind of a thing, at least in the earlier, like the first 5 years or first 3 years or something, you're more likely to run into just thirds, so just 2 notes at once doing that kind of thing. But like Bergmuller has that, lots of other little pieces of music, fun pieces of music. But keep checking in with your body throughout. That was that little handshake there, just like, I had a little tension, let it go. Into the third line here, but it's basically broken chords. It just means same notes of the same chord, just not all at once. Instead, one after the other. And then inversions is basically a game where whatever you're playing, take the bottommost note, bump it up an octave, now you're in the next inversion if everything else remains unchanged. So perhaps you noticed there was the first initial, just like very methodical, slow, comfortable speed. And then as that sort of got tuned up, started to feel good, take it faster. See if it sticks together, see if something falls apart, see if you need to focus in on a little area, some subsection of it. And at first, don't worry about things like rests and timing, just worry about like finding the comfort. If you have to pause, that's fine. But as you can see there, eventually return to precisely what's on the page. That's sort of just doing those chords, but broken instead of blocked. Oh, we're looking at the primary chord progression at the bottom left right now. so that's, just to pause it for a sec because it's a little bit noisy, that's really just me trying to get comfortable with like a loose play. Basically, again, for my students, you know this, we talk about this in lessons, I often think that for a repeated chord like that, you generally want to use like the kind of physicality you would if you were knocking on a door. You have a kind of loose wrist, but you have a sense of what you're chucking. There's sort of like you're throwing the weight of your hand, and you can do that to get those repetitions in a way that doesn't feel really tight and like you're controlling everything the whole time. Basically, you can be lazier and get a good result. And perhaps you notice my arms are sometimes pushing in for some of those chords or pulling back out. That's usually if I'm going to have a black key on the bottom finger of a given hand. I push in so I don't have to do any sort of weird angular stuff to get in position. I hope you've noticed everything we've looked at, I start very slow. And I make sure that it feels good. And if it doesn't, I take a moment and I work on the thing that did. Same kind of thing. Maybe you heard it. If you didn't, you can scrub back and you'll hear it. There was just that little blur that I didn't want there. I wanted it to be connected but not overlapping exactly. If any of you are drivers and you're comfortable driving a manual, it's sort of like that clutch accelerator relationship. For the record, I think arpeggios are very hard. I feel like they came much more slowly for me than scales did. This is important. Sometimes you gotta do it one-handed. It can actually be, I've noticed this anyway, where I'll get this weird thing where I can do something very stably, hands together, because that's sort of how I've really worked on it most. But if I break it up, I'll start to notice little problems or discomfort here or there in just like one hand on its own. So I have to do the thing I did where just a little bit of time on the left hand. And then I can get closer to this. Okay, so this is a weird technique. Don't do too much of it. But generally, the idea is you land and you make sure that you relax in that landing. And when you feel really good and relaxed, then try and send it as fast as you can. And so like right there, what I'm sort of trying to force my body to figure out without my brain getting in the way is how to make it down that one octave and get the thumb under to the beginning of the next octave on the way down. So ultimately adding little extra bits or an extra note or an extra couple notes to the bottom of it till eventually I can ideally, let's see if it goes this way. Ideally, I would ultimately be able to comfortably take it all the way down. And you can do this kind of thing too, where maybe you get it worked out so from the very top to like a middle mark, you can get there comfortably, and then you work from that middle mark down and try and marry those two things. And here I am again. Always remember, like, don't get into the habit of just doing it over and over and not thinking about it. Take that moment at the ideally at the beginning of each effort, and just really actually relax. Take a breath. Let go of anything that you're holding on to. Still messy. And chances are, like, if you're actually going through this stuff for the first time, like, you will not experience the capacity to just do these sudden clicks up. That'll take time. But if you actually really start from that really nice, slow, methodical, feeling it all level, it will set you up for that really well. So this is something, and I'll probably post this part of it separately on Instagram or something, but something I've been pushing my students to start doing in the context of this book is once you've worked through these 4 lines, you've worked through whatever the level may be, turn around, take the scale in the left hand, take the chords from the chord progression in the right hand, and almost like a light switch, as you walk up the scale on your left hand, change out the chords in the right. And so this, I'm sort of cheating a little bit because I try to keep, at least to begin with, just chord tones is kind of the rule in the right hand. That means just the notes that are in a chord. And at first you would do it blocked, then you'd add a rhythm in there, and then you would start to break up the chords and play them more melodically like so. The part in here that I can kind of think of as cheating at the moment is I'm adding a lot of passing tones. So those would be the notes that fall off beat, but also out of the chord, and sort of help you move around a little more songfully. But at its core, everything I'm doing here is basically the chords in that bottom left corner for E minor, and then some sort of version of the scale, whether it's directly just bottom to top and back again, potentially some section of it, and then another section of it. It's sort of like you get to do more the more comfortable you get with just like that bread and butter basic level. For what it's worth, these pages at level 4, they generally come as pairs of a major and a relative minor. In this case, G major, E minor. So I think at this point what's happened is I've modulated. I've changed out of noodling around in E minor into noodling around into G major, and then went back. Explaining exactly how that works is somewhat outside of the scope of this, but suffice it to say, every major has an intimately related minor key, and what relates them is that they share the same key signature, so the same collection of white and black keys to make the structure happen. Anyway, so that's one way to use these books. That's one way to take advantage of the information that's in them, to get a lot of good technical sort of preparation that will help you in your pieces, and then also to kind of finish it off with a little bit of a treat for yourself, if you will. Rats. I wonder, yeah. Anyway, so that is pretty much what I think is a reasonable way to approach one of these pages, or a reasonable way to use it, and kind of what you should focus on in the course of it, you know, all things sort of adjusted to be appropriate to your level, whichever book you're actually in, that will serve you well. That will help make sure that your practice goes better than it would otherwise, and that you end up feeling closer to your instrument, and that you have an ability to create as well as to produce. Anyway, if that was cool and you liked it, sign up, whatever, follow, do those things, and either way, hopefully it's useful for those of you that I'm already teaching or anyone else that stumbles upon it. Good luck, take care, there's always more to do, but I hope you have fun in the meantime.